alaikum friends. Today I will tell you about traditional grammar, that what is traditional grammar. So before knowing about traditional grammar, we will know about grammar, that what is grammar, because traditional grammar is an important part of grammar. So first of all we will know about grammar. So, grammar is a word that confuses considerably. It has been approached and defined differently by different scholars and school of linguistics. The term grammar goes back to a Greek word grammatia, which may be translated as the art of writing, but for a long time this term has been used very loosely to incorporate the whole study of language. So, grammar came to mean a set of normative and prescriptive rules in order to set up a standard of correct usage. So traditional grammar, we may define traditional grammar as collection of prescriptive rules and concepts about structure of language. But traditional grammar is mean basically the Aristotelian orientation toward the nature of language as exemplified in the work of ancient Greek and Romans, the speculative approach of the 18th century grammarians. The traditional grammar has a long tradition with it. So, origin of traditional grammar. Traditional grammar was originated from 15th century. Traditional grammar is in written form. There are ideas about sentence structure deriving from Aristotle and Plato. So ideas about traditional grammar, that what other ideas are there in traditional grammar. So I have mentioned before that traditional grammar has long tradition with it. There are ideas about sentence structure deriving from Aristotle and Plato, as well as there are ideas about the part of speech deriving from the Stoic grammarians. There are ideas about meaning stemming from the scholastic debates of the Middle Age, ideas about the relationship between language and mind deriving from the 17th century, philosophical controversies between language coming from the 18th century grammars of English, and ideas of the history of language deriving from the 19th century emphasizes on comparative philosophy. So we can say that traditional grammar is the vehicle by means of which ordinary students and scholars have mastered many languages for centuries. So, to know the importance of traditional grammar, we will consult to Chomsky, that what Chomsky says about traditional grammar. So, in the words of Chomsky, I think that we have much to learn from a careful study of what was achieved by the universal grammarians of the 17th and 18th century. It seems to me, in fact, the contemporary linguistic would do well to take their concept of language as a point of departure from current work. Not only do they make a fairly clear and well-founded distinction between deep and surface structure, but they also go on to study the nature of deep structure and provide valuable hints and insights concerning the rules that abstract underlying mental structures to surface from the rules that we would now call grammatical transformation. So coming toward the weaknesses of traditional grammar, as there are some weaknesses that I have mentioned here. Traditional grammar is inadequate and full of shortcomings. Traditional grammar is based mainly on Pak European classical language, hence it is a poor model for the grammar of language that differ from Greek, Latin and Sanskrit. It does not adequately distinguish between all the linguistic levels, phonetics, morphology, syntactics, semantics, and many more. It is normative and prescriptive rather than descriptive and explicit. It tries to study a living language like a dead one. It neglects not only the contemporary usage but also the functional and social varieties of language. Its approach is diachronic rather than synchronic. So defects of traditional grammar, as there are also some defects in traditional grammar. Sounds of speech. It was concerned with speech of sound but only in written form. Latin model. It was based primarily on a Latin model and was in some sense prescriptive. Assumptions. Its assumptions about language structure have been refuted by modern anthropological linguistics. So, according to John Lyon, as John Lyon was a famous British linguist, according to him, the traditional grammarian tended to assume not only that the written language was more fundamental than the spoken, but also that a practical form of written language, namely the literary language, was inherently purer and more correct than all other forms of language, written and spoken, and that it was his task as a grammarian to preserve this form of language from corruption. The persistence of traditional grammar. Of course, traditional grammar persists despite many opponents and questionable benefits. Why? There produce a question why. So this expert the working with words explain why traditional grammar is perpetuated. Why do the media cling to traditional grammar and its sometimes outdated rules? Mainly because they like the prescriptive approach of traditional grammar rather than the descriptive approach of structural grammar. So here I am differentiating the traditional and structural grammar. So traditional grammar is old while structural grammar is new. Traditional grammar is pre-scientific while structural grammar is scientific. Traditional grammar is illogical and structural grammar is logical. Traditional grammar gives priority to literal form, especially literary form of language, while structural grammar gives priority to the spoken form. Traditional grammar is lack of precision and economy, while structural grammar is full of precision and economy. Traditional grammar is based on Greek and Latin model, while structural grammar is based on factual study of language. Traditional grammar is fusion of all linguistic levels, while structural grammar is the separation of all the linguistic levels. Traditional grammar has a long history, while structural grammar has a short history. So, in conclusion, traditional grammar is the written form of language. Its method and notion are unverifiable, inaccurate, and incomplete. Its achievements were very rapidly forgotten. So, thank you for my cooperation, and that's all about traditional grammar.